Hello, scholars. This is Mr. Myers, Lesson 4.1, Citizenship and Public Opinion. Our objectives are to discuss the definition of citizenship and to examine the duties and benefits of being a citizen, and then talk a little bit about public opinion polling and how that's measured. Here's our overview, four main sections to the lesson. As always, take good structured notes, and let's begin. So first of all, a basic definition. A citizen is a member of a society who possesses all rights enjoyed by any person in the society and who is subject to duties as well. This is a two-way street. Citizenship means that you have certain things that you have the right to do, but also certain things that you have an obligation to do as well. So if you look to the right, you see the excerpt from the 14th Amendment that basically discusses how someone can become a citizen. All persons born or naturalized in the U.S. and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the U.S. and the state wherein they reside. So being born is kind of self-explanatory, but naturalization, here's our definition. It's the act of adopting an alien or a non-citizen into the state and granting all rights and duties possessed by other citizens. So you can apply and become a U.S. citizen even if you are not born here or born to citizens. It is basically a non-citizen becoming a citizen. Now, let's talk about the rights of citizens. What is a right? A right is the legal power to act or the legal power to use one's property. That's actually the definition of what a right is. It includes civil liberties, but it's not limited to civil liberties. So a couple categories to think about when it comes to rights. First of all, you have natural or personal rights. Those are those kind of life, liberty, property, those Lockean, Thomas Jeffersonian kind of ideas. These include, freedom of expression and freedom of belief, what we tend to think of as, civil liberties. But it also includes political rights as well. Those political rights could include voting or holding office, getting married, making sure that you have a fair trial and are protected equally under the law. And we refer to these as political rights not necessarily because they're directly involved in politics, but because they are related to the government or because of the existence of the government in some way, shape, or form. So the second side of that coin of citizenship, we already talked about rights, is duties. A duty is an obligation to do something, and it's related to the concept of debt, but it goes beyond the concept of debt. When you have paid a debt, you are finished and you no longer have an obligation, but the duties of citizenship, are always there. There can be legal duties like, jury duty, but they can also be moral duties as well, and this is a little bit more of a gray area. For example, do you have a moral duty to try to change an unjust law by practicing civil disobedience or whatever the case might be? So we have legal and moral duties. So legal duties of citizens we would want you to be familiar with would be like obeying laws, voting, which some people might actually consider a right, others would consider a duty, to pay taxes, to participate in jury service, and to participate in the military if drafted. The moral duties, like I had mentioned, are a little bit more ambiguous. So now that we've gone over the basic idea of rights and duties of citizenship, let's talk a little bit about public opinion. The purpose of public opinion and public opinion polling is that given that government rules for the people, it's a government of the people, by the people, for the people. It's important for representatives to know the views of their constituents. So how do we achieve this? There's a couple different ways. One would be under methods, this idea of constituent contact, that in the course of going to meetings and talking with constituents and hallway conversations and kind of the word on the street, here's what I'm sensing and feeling the people of my district are concerned about. But there's also something called scientific polling, and this is where you have organizations that are dedicated to scientifically trying to determine the needs and the wants and the opinions of various groups of people. While public opinion polling takes place all the time in election cycles, especially during like presidential elections, you see an overwhelming amount of polling data that's out there. Now there's a couple things that we have to be concerned about when we look at public opinion polls. Some public opinion polls are way more reliable than others. First of all, almost all public opinion polls will have a margin of error. It'll say the margin of error might be plus or minus 3 points. That margin of error is something to pay attention to. They're basically telling you we recognize the fact that there might be some things in our data that might cause it to be skewed, so you need to pay attention. If there's a plus or minus 15 On the public opinion polling, it means that there might be some problems with the way the questions were asked or worded. So here are a few issues that can cause public opinion polling to become skewed. First of all, having a small sample size. The larger the sample size, the better. If you ask 7 million people, you're going to get a much more reliable representative sample than if you ask 7 people. Another issue is wording. If you're trying to tease out how people feel about abortion, and if you ask if you think that people should have the right to kill unborn babies, you're going to get a different response than if you ask whether or not you think women should have the right to control their own reproductive health. The time of day that you make the phone call is important. If you call on Sunday morning at 10 or 11 o'clock, chances are there's going to be some religious folks that are at church and are not going to be included in that sample, and that could skew the results. If you call at 4 o'clock in the evening, a lot of corporate people may not be home from work until 5 or 6 o'clock. So that's something else to consider. You want to make sure that you have a geographically diverse sample. If all the people you're calling are from the Midwest or from the Northeast, that might be a problem as well. Gender balance, something else to consider. Likely voters, LV, versus registered voters. Likely voters are less reliable than registered voters. So these are all things to kind of consider when looking at the world of public opinion polling. Here are our objectives again. I hope you took good structured notes and bring any questions to class tomorrow. Thanks. Have a good night.